Well, we are super excited and to talk to Dawn today, and she's a productivity coach. She is also in the New York area and has also been a realtor. So you're just kind of the whole package here, and I'm super excited to kind of tap into your world and your thought process about not only what we're going through now, but how it can literally pivot us into our productivity for the future, and how we can move forward. So welcome, Dawn.
Thanks so much for having me, Jenna. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I cannot wait to talk to you. So for those that do not know you, can you give us just a little bit of your background and where you are today?
Sure. So I spent 30 years in the home building industry in sales management, and then later a digital agency, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And then in my mid 40s, my husband and I, when we became empty nesters, we decided to move, sell 90% of everything we owned and move to New York City. And we didn't really know what that move would bring, but it ended up that we both ended up in ministry. My husband is an executive pastor, and I'm a community pastor here in New York City. And I actually work bivocationally, so I spend part of my time as a pastor and part of my time as a Christian productivity coach.
Oh, that's amazing. So you are right now, you're in the heart of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, I mean, if we were just in New York in late January for a real estate conference, and of course, thriving, beautiful. We love New York City. What have you seen? What's the difference? And how has this impacted, like even just the spirit and the heart of New York?
Well, it's so hard for us to say because we've all been indoors for so long, right? And so we know that our streets are empty, and we're New Yorkers, so we live our whole life outside, in restaurants or whatever. And so it has been a change for us. But I think that what we're facing, which is probably similar to a lot of people all over the country, probably people watching, is just how do we manage uncertainty? Everybody's hit a little bit differently by this. Some people are impacted by the health aspect of it, but more than that, many of us are impacted in our businesses. Many of us are impacted by the uncertainty. Many of us are impacted by just how do we lead when nothing is certain. And so that's really what we're experiencing here. And I'm sure a lot of people watching can relate to it, probably nodding their head like, yeah, what do we do when we have no idea where we're going to be in 6 months, not just in our business, but in our city or in our nation or globally? How do we plan for that? How do we cast vision when there's so much that we don't know?
Right, exactly. We cannot lean back to a certain time where this was apples to apples. And so we are kind of, fear can definitely take over, fear of the uncertain. How have you navigated, and maybe given some of your colleagues that are reaching out to you for that leadership, what kind of advice are you giving people?
I think the number one advice is that number one, to know that even though you may not be able to set long-term goals right now, maybe a year out, sometimes the big win is just deciding what is my win today. So in coaching, we talk a lot about the daily 5. So what are the 5 things that help you perform at your best? And so for a lot of people, it's time spiritually, it's how we're exercising, how we're eating, how are we filling up in personal development. But everybody has 5 things that they do every day where we can feel like, if I just check these 5 boxes, I know that I'm giving myself the very best chance to operate on an even keel today, not to feel like I'm pulled into fear or pulled into uncertainty, but that I'm mentally strong and able to face whatever the challenges are that come my way today.
That's so great. And I know that you have also been in the real estate industry and maybe through some challenges there. Any advice to the realtors or the other small business owners listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were talking a little bit beforehand, before we hit record, just about the recession, the housing crisis when it hit many years ago. And although you can't, like you said, it's apples and oranges, you can't necessarily compare a pandemic to a housing crash. But I think that there are some similarities. And it just comes back to, where's the bottom on this? Where's the end of this? What is normal going to look like on the other side of this? How do I survive this? And how do I lead well in that uncertainty, like we talked about before? And the good news is, as we know, we got on the other side of that. And not only did we survive it, but we ended up thriving in many cases. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. But having been through that, uncertainty, having been through that fear, how am I going to, take care of my family, or some of the other things that come up at a time like this? What I wanted to talk about today is just three things that we can do right now that are going to help us come out stronger on the other side of this. Because here's the thing, we know we are going to come out on the other side of this. There is another side of this. Maybe it will look different. Maybe it will not be the normal that we know. Maybe it will be a new normal. However, we are going to come out on the other side. So what can we do today? What are some short-term things that we can focus on today so that as we come out of this crisis, that we are actually in a better place than we were when it all started? And so I think there's three ways that we can do that. One is relate, one is innovate, and the third one is reinvigorate. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what each of those mean at a time like this, if that's good.
Absolutely. I love that. So again, relate.
Uh-huh.
And we said the middle one,
Innovate.
Innovate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm taking notes here. All right.
Yeah. And reinvigorate.
And reinvigorate. Love it.
Yeah. So the first one is relate. This is all about building relationships. What we are in, we're a relationship business, we know that. And if you're watching, you're like, oh, that's not groundbreaking, build relationships. But how we manage those relationships in this moment is going to look different than how we manage relationships outside of this moment. And how we manage our relationships in this moment is going to determine the success of our business afterwards, because people are going to remember when it felt like everything fell apart. This is the person who reached out to me. This is the person who cared about me as a person and not as a dollar sign or a line item in their budget, right? And so a couple of ways that we can do that really well right now. Number one is the personal check-in. That is calling somebody and saying, we're not selling them anything. We're not trying to get them to buy into anything. We're not mining them for information. We're simply saying, you know what? I just want to know how you're doing. How are you doing? And that can be past customers, current customers, people in the pipeline. It can be partners. It can be employees. Just taking that time to sit down and just smile and dial, right? You can do that through voice memos. You can do it through calls, whatever works for you. But number one is to reach out personally. Everybody's sending emails, but people remember when somebody bothered to send them a note or reach out to them, and for no other reason, just to say, how are you really? I think that's a powerful question right now. How are you really? Because everybody's somewhere different with this. So number one is the personal check-ins. Number two is, this is the time to absolutely get or stay super consistent with emails and social media. Again, when you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And at a time like this, it can be so tempting to pull back and be like, I don't know what to say. People are going through really serious things right now. I don't know what to say to them. But this is when, if you have developed that trust with your customers, with the people who do business with you, it is comforting for them to hear from you. And so when you are able to stay that course when things are uncertain, it gives people confidence in your business, feeling like, oh, this hit and I don't know how their business is doing. It sends the message that you are here for the long haul, you're here for them, and you're here to help, most importantly. And then finally, under relating is just to be a real person. This is not the time for the well-curated Instagram photos of your perfect happy family and your perfect happy home. Nobody relates to that right now. This is the time where it's okay to say, you know what, like you, I'm dealing with some uncertainty, or like you, my kids are all home from school and I'm climbing the walls, whatever it is. We can be vulnerable, but we can also be hopeful. So people should not get off the phone with us or be at the end of our email and feel like, oh my gosh, that was so depressing. They should feel like, yeah, you know what, that person is going through it too, but they're still hopeful and positive. And people should feel better after they experience any kind of touch point with us during this time. And
That's
so
so
that's all under relate.
I love that. I mean, my big takeaway here is, being comfort. If you are a comfort during chaos, that builds confidence in your
Yeah.
clients. And it's, I relate back to maybe going to a funeral or some type of crisis in your life, that you remember who showed up. You
Yes. So
remember
true.
who came to the funeral, who stepped out, even when they didn't have the words to say, they were there. And so
Yeah.
be there, be present, and don't be afraid, even through video, right? Like just send them a video text, like whatever it looks like, to reach out in this crisis to build that confidence. That's so good.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And you bring up the really great point, is that it's okay to say, listen, I don't even really know what to say at a time like this. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you. And something like that can be really powerful. It can happen in DMs. It can, I mean, lots of different ways, whatever your comfort level is. But not only to check in with people once, but to check in with them again, because somebody who's okay this week may not be okay next week. And so just to really focus on keeping those relationships active. And again, not about selling, not about getting people to opt in, just to let people know that you are here to serve them.
So good.
Yeah. So the next one is all about innovate. We are stepping into a new normal. I think a couple weeks ago, I don't know about you, Jenna, but I just felt like, okay, well, this is a short period of time. We're going to get to the other side. Everything's going to go back to be into normal, and it's going to be fine. And I think now we're beginning to understand that this may be something that we learn how to live with for a very long time. And it's going to change how business is done. And whenever there's a new normal, there's this incredible opportunity to innovate. There's a couple of stories in business that I used to talk about in keynotes all the time. And the first one is Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford, we all know, he was number one obviously years ago, 1920s, he was number one in the car industry. But things were changing. There were paved roads. People wanted different things in their cars. And so Henry Ford's team actually built a prototype that would have been a perfect fit for what customers were saying they wanted. And Henry Ford walked around the car, legend says, and then proceeded to tear it apart with his bare hands. He refused to innovate. And Henry Ford would never again take that number one position in his lifetime. And then years later in the 70s, Kodak, which is obviously was a very, very, the leader in film for cameras, they actually possessed the very first digital camera that was in there. And they made the decision not to pursue it. They shelved the digital camera because they were too afraid of losing their film business. And we know that that was not a success story for Kodak either. And so the decisions that Henry Ford made, or the executives at Kodak made, that wasn't about making a mistake in their business. That used to terrify me, because I would be so terrified of, how do I not make a mistake in the business? But their mistake was not so much the decision made in that moment. It was that they stopped listening to what the customer wanted. And so in this time, as we're building relationships, we have got to keep our ear to the ground and understand, how people shop a year ago is probably not going to be at all the way that they shop a year from now, whether they're shopping for a home or shopping for a couch or whatever it is. And so our job, first and foremost, is to serve. That's why we do what we do. So we've got to not hold on too tightly to the way that things have always been done. And we've got to be willing to listen to our customers, hear what they're telling us that they need, and be super innovative about how we deliver that. So whether that's starting a YouTube channel or starting a podcast, or maybe rethinking how we meet with people. We're obviously doing everything virtually now. So there's going to be some things that we need to rethink, but always let your customer tell you the direction to go in. There's not a business consultant on earth who is more valuable than simply getting in front of your customers and asking them the hard questions about what they need and figuring out how you can serve them.
That's so good.
So that,
I mean, it's going to be a perfect timing of now, like to do that, to be able to, you have their undivided attention.
yes.
What do you need? How do you anticipate moving forward back into production? And what do you feel like you're going to need from us to do that? That's so good.
Yeah, it's really true. And I'll give you an example from my own life. As I mentioned, I was in sales and sales management for real estate for a really long time. And when the recession hit, that was the same time that the iPhone came out. It was the same time that Facebook did business pages. Twitter had started. And so I felt that there were a lot of builders. I was in home building. There were a lot of builders who were saying, well, how do we do this internet marketing thing? We didn't have to do it before because we had lines of buyers waiting outside of our door. But their old way of doing things at that time, there was still a lot of direct mail. There was still a lot of big billboards. There was still a lot of colorful page ads. And builders didn't have the budget for that, and it wasn't working anymore. And so I knew that there was an opportunity to use these really low cost tools like email and social media to reach buyers, and that's where the trend was going anyway. And so I ended up leaving sales and starting a digital agency. And that was a big risk to take at the time in the middle of a recession to start a business, but it ended up being a really the best decision I could have made, because that is where the people I served, which was home builders, that was the direction they were all going in. And so just taking a look at your business and what's working, what's no longer working, and how can I pivot to innovate and give my customers the things they need.
So brilliant. Love it. Hope you guys are taking notes. This is so good.
And then the last one is reinvigorate. Number one in this section is really to get back to your foundation of your spiritual rhythms. Now, I'm a bivocational pastor. I'm a Christian, so for me, that's Jesus. But I think that at a time when it feels like we're busy and there's a lot to do, we can kind of skip or shortchange ourselves on this. But more than anything, we've got to go to the place where we can get hope, where we can get faith, where we can get peace. And for me, as a Christian, again, I feel like the guidance that I get is from God. I don't know what's going to happen on the other side of this, but God does. I don't know what people are going to need. I don't know what the world is going to look like, but there is nothing here that is taking God by surprise. So it makes sense that my greatest mentor, if you will, in this season is just to get quiet before God and just to say, what would you have me do today? I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to know how all of this ends. Would you just give me your new mercies today? The word says that His mercies are new every morning. He will give us what we need for the day. And so whatever your spiritual rhythms are, whatever your spiritual foundations are, wherever you find faith and peace and hope, be there every day. Make that a priority. If you usually spend 30 minutes there, do an hour. I know if you are somebody who's got your kids home from school, you're like, I don't have an hour to do that. I get it. But make this a number one priority, because it's important that every single day we're refreshing and reinvigorating our reserves of faith, hope, peace, and guidance in what to do next.
Yeah. So good. I mean, I think about, the children of Israel as you're out in, the wilderness, where some of us kind of feel like we're in the wilderness, and what God promised was direction, and He promised manna for the day. I'm going to give you enough for today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worry of its own.
Yes.
He takes care of the birds of the air. Like, let's focus on today. And even as small business owners, it's so easy for us to worry about the unknown or tomorrow and we can't even control that. All we're promised is today. God, provide me what I need today, and I'm going to trust you
Yeah.
for my tomorrow.
Yeah, manna seasons are so powerful. Manna seasons just build our faith so much. And they're beautiful seasons. And very often, I don't know what your experience is, but I find that when I'm in a manna season, God is building my faith for something specific, big that is coming up. And it's almost like, like going to the gym and working out every day for a big competition. I don't do that, but it's sort of the same idea, is that manna seasons really build our faith muscle. And allow us to lean in and say, you know what, I got up every day. I didn't know what was going to happen, but God provided. God provided again and again and again. And so there's so much blessing in these seasons. I'm not saying that they're fun. I'm not saying that they're, we wouldn't wish for them, but there's blessing, and there are a lot of gifts in this season as well.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I love that. And Dawn, I want to thank you for sharing and imparting that. I hope that all of you get to watch this over and over again, and even keep it earmarked for a time where you may feel a little down and you feel like you need to get back to those basics to pivot you into greatness, in the right. It's like what's in here is going to come out here. It's going to impact. And so we really have to get this aligned so that we can go into the right activity and action that's going to propel us forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
If you go to dawnsadler.com, I'm on Instagram at Dawn Sadler, and you can find me, and I'd be happy to connect.
Well, Dawn, we will be in New York. We're usually there a couple of times a year. I can't wait to shake your hand or hug your neck and say,
I would love that.
For the day that we're able to do that, just to be able to say thank you for imparting this great knowledge and wisdom to us. And we pray blessings and prosperity over you guys in this new season. And just thank you again so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.